The most dangerous smile is not the one that hides pain. It is the one that appears the moment a woman decides she will never beg again. The crystal chandeliers of the Whitmore Foundation Grand Gala scattered rivers of golden light across the marble ballroom, turning every champagne glass into a miniature constellation. New York's elite filled the room with polished laughter and carefully rehearsed elegance, their voices blending into the soft notes of a live orchestra positioned beneath a sweeping staircase draped in white roses. At the center of it all stood Nia Brooks Whitmore. Her crimson gown flowed around her like liquid confidence, the rich fabric catching the light each time she moved. 10 years earlier, Ethan had once told her that red was her color. "Red doesn't make you beautiful," he had whispered during their honeymoon. "You make red beautiful." For years, she had carried those words like a treasured jewel. Tonight, they felt strangely distant. Nia stood near the ballroom entrance, her fingers resting lightly against the stem of a champagne flute. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered beneath the spring sky, its endless lights stretching toward the horizon like promises written in gold. This gala marked the 20th anniversary of Whitmore Capital. To everyone else, it was a celebration. To Nia, it was supposed to be something more. A new beginning. A reminder that after 10 years of marriage, she and Ethan had survived every challenge life had placed before them. Or at least that was what she had believed. The orchestra transitioned into a slower melody. Guests applauded as cameras flashed across the room. A giant screen illuminated the far wall, displaying images from Ethan Whitmore's rise from ambitious entrepreneur to billionaire CEO. The audience admired the empire. Only Nia knew the sacrifices hidden beneath it. The sleepless nights, the abandoned dreams, the opportunities quietly surrendered so his future could shine brighter. She had never regretted any of it. Not once. Because love, she believed, was not measured by what you received. It was measured by what you willingly gave. Nia, the familiar voice, pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to find Amelia Grant, one of the foundation's board members, approaching with a warm smile. "You look stunning tonight." "Thank you," Nia replied softly. Amelia glanced around the ballroom. "Where's Ethan?" A strange question, because Nia had been wondering the same thing. The event had started nearly 40 minutes earlier. Yet her husband, the guest of honor, had disappeared shortly after greeting investors. "He's probably handling something business-related," Nia said. The answer sounded reasonable. It just didn't feel true. A faint unease settled in her chest. Small, almost invisible, like the first crack appearing beneath perfect glass. The ballroom lights suddenly dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the grand staircase. Excited murmurs spread across the room. Everyone expected Ethan Whitmore. Instead, a tall blonde woman appeared at the top step. Vanessa Sterling, a social media celebrity whose face frequently occupied magazine covers and luxury campaigns. She descended slowly, smiling as cameras immediately pivoted toward her. The crowd whispered. Some looked surprised. Others looked uncomfortable. Nia remained perfectly still, because she had seen that smile before. Not in person, but in photographs. Photos Ethan had insisted meant nothing. Just networking, he had said. Just publicity. Just business. The whispers grew louder. Then came the sound that silenced the room entirely. Applause. Not from the audience. From someone standing just behind Vanessa. Someone every person in the ballroom instantly recognized. Ethan Whitmore. His tailored black tuxedo fit him with effortless precision. Power seemed to follow him wherever he went. Tonight was no different. Yet as Nia watched him descend beside Vanessa, a feeling colder than fear settled over her heart. Because he wasn't walking behind her. He wasn't walking toward her. He was walking with Vanessa. The cameras exploded with flashes. Investors exchanged nervous glances. Several guests quietly looked away, as if they already understood something Nia had yet to fully accept. Ethan reached the ballroom floor. Vanessa slipped her hand through his arm. Neither attempted to hide it. Neither seemed concerned by the hundreds of eyes watching. For one suspended moment, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Then Ethan's gaze found Nia. Across the crowd. Across 10 years. Across every promise they had ever made. His expression remained calm. Controlled. Almost indifferent. And suddenly, Nia understood. Not the details. Not the explanations. Not the reasons. Just the truth. The kind of truth that arrives without warning and changes everything. A quiet stillness settled over her. The orchestra continued playing. Champagne glasses clinked. The city sparkled beyond the windows. Yet inside Nia Brooks Whitmore, something had already ended. And for the first time that night, she smiled. Not because she was happy, not because she was strong, but because somewhere deep within her heart, a woman who had spent 10 years sacrificing herself had finally made a decision. And before the night was over, that decision would change all of their lives forever. The applause faded, but the tension remained. It lingered beneath the glittering chandeliers like a storm hidden behind a beautiful sky. Nia Brooks Whitmore stood motionless near the center of the ballroom, her champagne untouched, her crimson gown glowing beneath the golden lights. Around her, New York's most influential investors, politicians, celebrities, and business leaders exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had understood it. And yet no one dared say a word. Because the man responsible was Ethan Whitmore, the billionaire king of Manhattan. The man whose signature could build fortunes or destroy them. Vanessa Sterling tightened her grip around Ethan's arm as flashes from dozens of cameras illuminated their faces. The image was perfect. The powerful billionaire. The beautiful socialite. The future everyone could already imagine. Except for one problem. His wife was standing only 20 feet away. A silence settled across the ballroom. The kind of silence that appears when people know they are witnessing the beginning of a disaster. Ethan finally broke it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced smoothly, lifting a glass toward the crowd. His voice carried effortlessly across the room. "Thank you for being here tonight." Scattered applause followed. The giant screens behind him displayed the Whitmore Capital logo. Everything appeared polished, controlled, professional. But Nia could feel something else beneath the surface. A performance. A carefully prepared performance. And somehow, she had become part of the script without knowing it. Ethan continued speaking about company growth, global expansion, and future investments. The audience listened attentively. Vanessa smiled at exactly the right moments. The cameras followed every movement. Yet Nia noticed something strange. Her husband never looked at her. Not once. 10 years. 10 years of shared mornings. Shared dreams. Shared sacrifices. And now he avoided her gaze as if she were a stranger. The realization should have hurt. Instead, it created a strange calm. Like the moment after a glass shatters. When the noise is gone. And only the truth remains. Then came the question. A reporter near the front raised her hand. "Mr. Whitmore, there have been rumors about changes in your personal life. Would you like to address them tonight?" Several guests visibly stiffened. Others immediately turned toward Nia. The reporter looked nervous. But curiosity was stronger than caution. Ethan smiled. Vanessa smiled too. That was when Nia knew. They had expected this. The question wasn't a surprise. It was part of the evening. Part of the plan. A flicker of disappointment crossed her heart. Not because of what was happening, but because she finally understood how long it had likely been happening. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks. His expression remained calm. Measured. Cold. "I've always believed that success requires growth," he said. The room listened carefully. "Sometimes people grow together." He paused. "Sometimes they don't." The sentence landed like a stone in still water. Ripples spread instantly through the crowd. No names. No accusations. Yet everyone knew exactly what he meant. Nia felt dozens of eyes settle upon her. Waiting. Watching. Expecting heartbreak. Expecting tears. Expecting humiliation. Instead, she simply stood there. Elegant. Silent. Unshaken. The reporter hesitated before asking. "Another question. Are you saying your marriage is ending?" The ballroom became impossibly quiet. Ethan looked toward Vanessa. A subtle smile appeared. Then he spoke the words that would dominate headlines by morning. "Some people belong in your future." His gaze briefly moved toward Nia, then away. "And some people belong in your past." A collective gasp swept through the room. Several women looked horrified. A few men lowered their eyes. Even the orchestra stopped playing. For a brief moment, Ethan seemed satisfied, as though he had finally said what he wanted to say. Then Vanessa stepped closer, close enough for every camera to capture it, close enough to leave no room for interpretation. And suddenly, the room no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like an execution. The execution of a marriage. Nia slowly placed her champagne glass onto a passing server's tray. The crystal made the softest sound as it touched the silver surface. A tiny sound, yet somehow louder than Ethan's entire speech. She looked around the ballroom one final time. The chandeliers, the marble floors, the familiar faces, the empire she had helped build from shadows. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every dream. She thought she would feel anger. She thought she would feel grief. Instead, she felt clarity. Pure, sharp, liberating clarity. Across the room, Ethan finally met her eyes. Perhaps he expected her to break. Perhaps he expected a confrontation. Perhaps he expected tears. What he saw instead made his confidence falter for the first time all night. Nia smiled. Not a wounded smile. Not a desperate smile. A peaceful one. A smile that seemed to belong to someone who already knew how the story would end. Then she reached into her evening clutch. Her fingers closed around a sealed, ivory envelope. The envelope she had carried with her all evening. The envelope bearing Ethan Whitmore's name. And for the first time that night, the billionaire felt something he could not explain. Fear. Fear. The feeling arrived so suddenly that Ethan Whitmore almost failed to recognize it. For years, he had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without blinking. He had stared down competitors, hostile investors, and financial crises. Fear was something that happened to other people, not to him. Yet as Nia stood beneath the crystal chandeliers holding that ivory envelope, something deep inside him shifted. Because her smile wasn't the smile of a defeated woman. It was the smile of someone who had already let go. And somehow, that was far more dangerous. The ballroom remained frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. Every eye followed Nia as she crossed the polished marble floor. Her heels clicked softly against the stone. Measured, graceful, unhurried, as though she had all the time in the world. When she finally reached Ethan, she stopped only inches away. For a brief moment, husband and wife faced each other in complete silence. 10 years, reduced to a single glance. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably beside Ethan. For the first time all evening, the confidence in her expression wavered. Because she suddenly felt like an outsider standing between two people whose history stretched far beyond anything she understood. Nia looked directly at Ethan. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Just calm. The kind of calm that appears after a long war has finally ended. Then she held out the envelope. For you. Her voice was soft. Yet in the silent ballroom, everyone heard it. Ethan stared at the envelope. Nia. The name sounded unfamiliar coming from his lips, as though he hadn't spoken it properly in years. She didn't respond. Instead, she placed the envelope into his hand. The thick ivory paper felt strangely heavy. He glanced down at it. His name was written across the front in elegant handwriting. Ethan Whitmore. Nothing more. No explanation. No accusation. No plea. Just his name. The simplicity unsettled him. Vanessa folded her arms. What is that supposed to mean? The question came out sharper than she intended. Nia finally looked at her. For only a second. A brief glance. Yet something in that look made Vanessa suddenly feel exposed. Like a child pretending to understand an adult conversation. Nia smiled politely. It doesn't concern you. The words were gentle, but their impact was devastating. Several guests exchanged startled looks. Vanessa's face tightened. Immediately, for the first time that evening, she had no response. Because Nia hadn't insulted her. She had simply dismissed her as irrelevant. The distinction was brutal. Ethan looked between the two women. A strange pressure began building in his chest. Something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. He glanced again at the envelope. What is this? Nia's eyes softened slightly. Something I should have given you a long time ago. A faint crease appeared between Ethan's brows. What does that mean? For the first time all evening, genuine uncertainty entered his voice. Nia inhaled slowly. The ballroom seemed to disappear around them. The cameras, the guests, the music, none of it mattered anymore. Only the truth remained. It means I'm done fighting for someone who stopped choosing me years ago. The sentence landed harder than any accusation, because it contained no bitterness, only acceptance. And acceptance is often more final than hatred. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Words failed him. An unfamiliar experience. Nia reached toward his left hand, toward the platinum wedding ring he had worn for a decade. Her fingers hovered near it, not touching, just looking, a memory passing between them. Then she lowered her hand. I hope she makes you happy. The room collectively held its breath. Vanessa looked stunned. Ethan looked even worse. Because neither of them had expected kindness. Especially not now. Especially not after everything. Nia stepped backward. One step, then another, creating distance, creating an ending. The movement felt strangely symbolic, as though she were physically walking out of a chapter that no longer belonged to her. A photographer accidentally snapped a picture. The flash illuminated the scene. The billionaire, the mistress, the wife walking away. It would become one of the most shared images in Manhattan by sunrise. But none of them knew that yet. Nia turned toward the grand exit doors. The massive glass panels reflected the city lights beyond. Freedom waited on the other side. Just before reaching them, she stopped. Without turning around, she spoke one final sentence. "When you finally decide to open that envelope, Ethan," her voice echoed softly through the ballroom, "you'll understand what you really lost." Then she walked away. The doors opened. Cold Manhattan air rushed inside. And for the first time in 10 years, Nia Brooks Whitmore left Ethan's world behind. Behind her, the ballroom remained silent. The envelope rested in Ethan's hand, unopened, unread, and carrying a truth powerful enough to destroy everything he thought he knew about his own empire. The envelope remained in Ethan Whitmore's hand long after Nia disappeared into the Manhattan night. The ballroom eventually came back to life. Music resumed. Conversations restarted. Champagne flowed once more. Yet something fundamental had changed. No one could ignore it. The king of the room no longer looked untouchable. For the first time in years, Ethan appeared distracted, almost shaken. Vanessa noticed it immediately. She slipped her hand through his arm as photographers continued taking pictures. "Everyone's waiting," she whispered. Ethan looked toward the exit, toward the doors through which Nia had vanished. For a brief second, he considered following her. The impulse surprised him. Then it disappeared. Pride was quicker, stronger, more familiar. He slid the envelope into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Unopened. "Let's finish the evening." Vanessa smiled with relief. The answer was exactly what she wanted to hear. But somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt an unexpected sense of discomfort, as though he had just ignored a warning he didn't fully understand. The next morning, headlines exploded across New York. Billionaire's wife walks out of charity gala. Whitmore marriage appears over. Mystery surrounds Nia Whitmore's departure. Social media dissected every photograph, every glance, every expression. The image that spread fastest wasn't Ethan standing beside Vanessa. It was Nia walking away. Elegant, composed, dignified. Millions of people saw the photo. Most reached the same conclusion. She looked like a woman choosing herself. Meanwhile, inside the penthouse overlooking Central Park, Ethan sat alone in his home office. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched endlessly below. The office had always been his sanctuary, a place where problems could be solved with logic, numbers, strategy, control. Yet the silence felt unusually heavy. His gaze drifted toward the envelope resting on his desk, still unopened. He could open it now. It would take seconds. Instead, he turned away. His assistant entered moments later carrying a tablet. "Your 9 o'clock meeting is ready." Ethan nodded. Business first. Always business first. That philosophy had built Whitmore Capital into a financial empire. Surely it would carry him through this as well. Or so he told himself. Weeks passed. Then months. The divorce paperwork arrived. Clean. Professional. Unexpectedly simple. Nia asked for very little. No public accusations. No interviews. No attempt to damage his reputation. No fight. The lack of resistance unsettled him more than any legal battle could have. Vanessa, however, celebrated. She moved into the penthouse less than 3 months later. The tabloids loved it. The public hated it. But Ethan stopped paying attention. At least he tried to. Because another problem had begun demanding his attention. Whitmore Capital was changing. Not dramatically. Not at first. Just small things. Minor delays. Projects that stalled unexpectedly. Negotiations that failed without clear explanation. Trusted clients quietly leaving. Profits shrinking in departments that had once thrived effortlessly. Nothing catastrophic. Yet nothing felt stable anymore. Board meetings became longer. Investors became nervous. Questions multiplied. Answers did not. One afternoon, Ethan sat reviewing quarterly reports when his chief financial officer entered the room. The older man looked concerned. That alone was unusual. "What is it?" The CFO hesitated. "We lost another major account." Ethan frowned. "How?" "No one knows." The answer irritated him immediately. "There is always a reason." The CFO nodded slowly. That's what worries me. A strange silence followed. Then the older man added something unexpected. These problems started shortly after Nia left. The room went still. Ethan's jaw tightened instantly. What's your point? The CFO carefully chose his words. My point is that Mrs. Whitmore was involved in more areas of this company than most people realized. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Annoyance flashed across his face. Nia wasn't an executive. No, the CFO agreed. But somehow she always knew when something was wrong before the rest of us. The comment lingered in the air. Uncomfortable. Impossible to dismiss completely. After the meeting ended, Ethan remained alone. His eyes eventually settled on a locked drawer. Inside that drawer sat the ivory envelope. Still sealed. Still waiting. Nearly a year had passed. A year without Nia. A year of growing problems. A year of pretending her absence meant nothing. Slowly, Ethan opened the drawer. The envelope looked exactly the same. Untouched. Patient. As though it already knew its moment would come. Outside, Manhattan glittered beneath the evening skyline. Inside, the billionaire stared at the letter his former wife had left behind. And for the first time in 12 months, he wondered whether the answers to his collapsing empire had been sitting in that drawer all along. The envelope sat beneath Ethan Whitmore's fingertips. For nearly a year, it had remained untouched. A simple piece of ivory paper. Nothing more. Yet somehow it had become heavier than every contract he had signed, every acquisition he had completed, every billion-dollar decision he had ever made. Outside the windows, Manhattan glowed beneath a curtain of rain. Inside the office, silence surrounded him. No advisors. No investors. No Vanessa. Just Ethan. And the letter. Slowly, he broke the seal. The sound seemed louder than it should have. The moment felt strangely irreversible, as though opening it would divide his life into two versions. The man he had been, and the man he was about to become. Inside was a single handwritten letter. No anger. No accusations. No legal threats. Just Nia's elegant handwriting. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means enough time has passed for you to finally stop listening to your pride. I know you believe Whitmore Capital belongs to you. In many ways, it does. You built the public image. You led the meetings. You stood on the stages. You became the face everyone admired. And I was proud of you, more than you'll ever know. But there are truths you've never fully seen. Some of your most successful acquisitions happened because relationships I spent years building opened doors for you. Several investors who trusted Whitmore Capital did so because they trusted me first. Many partnerships survived because I quietly repaired damage after difficult negotiations. I never needed credit. I only wanted us to succeed. Together. That was enough for me. For a long moment, Ethan stopped reading. His chest tightened. Memories surfaced unexpectedly. Business dinners Nia had insisted on attending. Weekend charity events she never missed. Private conversations she had with influential families. Meetings that suddenly became easier after she became involved. At the time, he had viewed those things as supportive gestures. Background contributions. Nothing essential. Now he wasn't so sure. He continued reading. You once asked me why people trusted me so easily. I told you it was because I listened. You laughed and said listening wasn't a business strategy. Maybe you were right. Or maybe that's why people stayed loyal. Not because of power, but because they felt seen. The sentence hit harder than he expected, because lately loyalty seemed to be disappearing everywhere around him. Clients, partners, employees, even board members. The letter continued. The day you chose someone else wasn't the day our marriage ended. It ended much earlier. It ended the moment you stopped respecting the people who helped you become who you are. Not just me. Everyone. Success can make a person believe they're standing alone on a mountain. But nobody climbs alone, Ethan. Nobody. His grip tightened around the pages. The office suddenly felt smaller. The silence heavier. For the first time, Ethan began to see a pattern. The empire wasn't simply losing money. It was losing trust. And trust had always been something Nia understood better than anyone. At the bottom of the final page was one last paragraph. Despite everything, I don't hate you. I hope one day you become the man I believed you could be. Not because I need you. Not because I want you back. But because that version of you deserved to exist. Goodbye, Ethan. Nia. The room fell completely silent. Ethan lowered the letter slowly. His eyes remained fixed on the signature. Goodbye. Not goodbye for now. Not goodbye until you change. Just goodbye. Final. Certain. Permanent. For the first time since their separation, he truly understood that she was gone. Not physically. Emotionally. Completely. A wave of regret swept through him with frightening force. Because suddenly he could see everything he had dismissed. Everything he had taken for granted. Everything he had assumed would always remain beside him. The next morning, Ethan arrived at headquarters earlier than usual. Employees noticed immediately. Something about him looked different. Less certain. Less invincible. As he walked through the executive floor, fragments of conversation stopped. People watched him carefully. Then something unexpected happened. A young employee passing through the corridor accidentally dropped a stack of documents. The papers scattered everywhere. Normally, Ethan would have continued walking. He always had. This time he stopped, bent down, and helped gather every page. The young woman stared at him in shock. "So sorry, Mr. Whitmore." Ethan handed back the documents. "It's okay." 3 simple words. Yet somehow they felt unfamiliar. As he continued walking toward his office, Nia's letter echoed inside his mind. Nobody climbs alone. For years he had believed his success made him powerful. Now he was beginning to wonder whether the strongest person in his life had been the woman he had foolishly convinced himself he no longer needed. And somewhere across the country, far beyond Manhattan, Nia Brooks Whitmore was building something entirely new. Something that no longer carried his name. Something that would soon force the entire world to discover who she had always been. 3 months later, a magazine landed on Ethan Whitmore's desk. He almost ignored it. Almost. The cover featured a woman standing beneath the golden lights of a charity event in Chicago. Elegant, confident, unmistakable. Nia Brooks Whitmore. Except she was no longer using Whitmore. The headline stretched boldly across the page. The woman quietly changing. America's business landscape. Ethan stared at the photograph. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. The image felt unfamiliar. Not because she looked different. Because she looked exactly the same. The same graceful posture. The same intelligent eyes. The same calm smile. The difference was that the entire world finally seemed to notice. He opened the magazine. The article was 12 pages long. By the 3rd page, Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Nia had founded a national nonprofit initiative focused on supporting minority-owned businesses. Within 2 years, the organization had expanded into multiple states. Major corporations had joined. Political leaders had praised the model. Community leaders called it transformative. Investors called it revolutionary. And somehow, despite all the publicity, Nia had never once mentioned him. Not a single quote. Not a single reference. Not a single complaint. The article focused entirely on her work, her leadership, her vision, her impact, as though she had stepped into the spotlight and discovered she belonged there all along. Ethan continued reading. Then he froze. One paragraph changed everything. Before founding her organization, Brooks spent nearly a decade serving as an informal strategic advisor and relationship architect behind several major financial ventures. Industry insiders describe her as one of the most influential unseen figures in corporate philanthropy. His eyes moved over the sentence again and again. Relationship architect. Influential unseen figure. Suddenly, pieces began connecting. Dozens of them. A successful merger in Boston. An investor retreat in Aspen. A crisis involving a major client in California. Moments he had once considered victories of his own leadership. Moments where Nia had quietly solved problems before they exploded. Moments he had never truly appreciated. The realization was painful, not because she had helped him, because he had never bothered to understand how much. Across the country, Nia stood on a stage in Chicago addressing a crowd of business leaders. The ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of guests listened attentively. Reporters filled the back rows. Television cameras captured every moment. Nia remained calm, poised, authentic. The audience loved her, not because she demanded attention, because she never did. Her presence carried something stronger than charisma. It carried credibility. When she spoke about opportunity, people listened. When she spoke about leadership, people believed her. When she spoke about dignity, people felt it. After the event ended, several guests approached her. One of them was a senator. Another was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. A third was a philanthropist whose foundation managed billions of dollars. All wanted partnerships. All wanted meetings. All wanted access to the woman who seemed capable of bringing people together in ways others could not. Nia accepted their compliments graciously, then returned to her hotel suite. Alone, away from cameras, away from applause, away from public attention. She removed her earrings and looked out across the city skyline. The lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass. For a moment, memories surfaced. The gala in Manhattan, the envelope, the marriage, the betrayal, the heartbreak. She allowed herself exactly 1 minute to remember. Then she let it go, because she had spent too many years living inside someone else's story. Now she was building her own. Meanwhile, back in New York, Ethan's problems continued multiplying. Several board members were openly questioning his leadership. Investors demanded explanations. Profits continued slipping. And Vanessa, once thrilled by luxury and attention, seemed increasingly frustrated by the tension surrounding him. The relationship that had once felt exciting now felt exhausting. Conversations turned into arguments. Arguments turned into silence. One evening, Vanessa finally snapped. "You talk about her constantly." Ethan looked up. "I didn't mention her." "You don't have to." Her voice sharpened. "Every time someone praises her, every time her name appears in the news, every time another article comes out, I see your face." The accusation lingered between them, because both knew it was true. Ethan said nothing. Vanessa laughed bitterly. "Do you know what's ironic?" He remained silent. "You spent years treating her like she was standing in your shadow." She grabbed her purse, then headed toward the door. "Turns out you were standing in hers." The door slammed shut. The penthouse fell silent. Ethan stood alone in the darkness. And for the first time, he realized the entire country was beginning to see Nia Brooks for who she truly was. Soon, the people closest to him would discover the truth as well, including the board members who still believed Whitmore Capital had been built by one man alone. The invitation arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Heavy ivory cardstock, gold lettering, elegant, exclusive. The National Leadership and Philanthropy Gala, Washington, D.C., one of the most prestigious events in the country. Political leaders, industry titans, global philanthropists, media executives. The kind of room where reputations were made and destroyed. Ethan Whitmore stared at the invitation resting on his desk. For years, receiving one had felt routine. Expected. This time felt different. Because attached to the guest list was a name he could not ignore. Nia Brooks. Featured honoree. Keynote speaker. He read the words twice. Then a third time. The woman he had once publicly humiliated was about to stand before some of the most influential people in America. Not as someone's wife. Not as someone's support system. Not as someone standing quietly in the background. As the most anticipated speaker of the evening. Across the country, Nia received an identical invitation. Her assistant placed it on the conference table during a meeting. The media attention will be enormous. Nia glanced at the card, then returned to reviewing a proposal. Then we'll focus on the mission. Her assistant smiled. Most people would have celebrated. Most people would have used the opportunity to build a personal brand. Nia remained the same. Focused, grounded, unmoved by fame. Yet even she understood the significance of the event. The gala represented more than recognition. It represented validation. Years earlier, rooms like this had viewed her as Ethan Whitmore's wife. Now those same rooms were requesting her presence. As the main attraction, as preparations for the event intensified, whispers began circulating throughout corporate circles. Board members talked. Journalists talked. Investors talked. The same question appeared everywhere. How much of Whitmore Capital's success had actually belonged to Nia Brooks? The question spread faster than anyone expected. Soon former employees began speaking privately. Stories emerged. Meetings she had saved. Partnerships she had repaired. Clients who trusted her more than they trusted Ethan. Little by little, a hidden history started coming into focus. The board of Whitmore Capital noticed. Unfortunately for Ethan, so did the shareholders. At the next quarterly meeting, tension filled the conference room. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual. Questions arrived immediately. One board member leaned forward. When exactly did Nia Brooks stop consulting for the company? Ethan felt his stomach tighten. After the divorce. Another director exchanged a glance with her colleague. And since then we've lost 6 major partnerships. No one said anything. They didn't need to. The implication hung in the air. Visible. Painful. Undeniable. For the first time in his career, Ethan found himself defending decisions he once considered unquestionable. The meeting ended without disaster, but not without damage. As executives filed out of the room, Ethan remained seated. Alone. The silence felt familiar now. Too familiar. Months earlier, he had blamed market conditions, competition, economic uncertainty. Now he was beginning to face something more difficult. The possibility that the company had never truly understood who its most valuable leader was. That evening, Ethan stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The Manhattan skyline shimmered beneath the darkness. He remembered another night years ago, Nia standing in the same spot, looking at the city, talking about purpose, about impact, about leaving something meaningful behind. At the time, he had barely listened. Now every forgotten conversation seemed to return, one by one, like ghosts. 3 days later, Washington welcomed hundreds of guests from across the nation. Luxury cars lined the streets. Television crews assembled. Outside, security teams moved efficiently through the crowd. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers illuminated towering floral arrangements. Everything sparkled. Everything felt important. Yet the most talked about arrival hadn't happened yet. Then the doors opened. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. Nia entered the ballroom. Not dramatically. Not intentionally. Simply gracefully. She wore an elegant midnight blue gown. No excessive jewelry. No attempt to impress. No performance. And somehow that made her impossible to ignore. The room seemed to shift around her. People approached immediately. Governors. Executives. Journalists. Foundation leaders. Each waiting for a chance to speak with her. Across the ballroom, Ethan watched. He had attended countless galas. Countless celebrations. Countless elite gatherings. He had never seen anything quite like this. Not because Nia commanded the room. Because the room willingly moved toward her. Respectfully. Naturally. As if influence had finally found its rightful owner. For a brief moment, their eyes met. The noise of the ballroom disappeared. Years of memories seemed to collapse into a single second. Neither smiled. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Then Nia gave a small, polite nod. The kind offered to a stranger. Nothing more. Nothing less. And walked away, leaving Ethan standing beneath the golden lights, realizing that the woman he once believed would always remain behind him had become the person everyone had come to see. What he didn't know was that before the night ended, a truth hidden for years would be revealed in front of every powerful person in that ballroom. The ballroom fell silent when Nia Brooks stepped onto the stage. Hundreds of guests turned toward her. The glow of crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Television cameras adjusted. Reporters lifted their pens. Some of the most powerful people in America waited to hear her speak. Nia stood behind the podium for several seconds before saying a single word. Calm. Steady. Composed. The confidence wasn't rehearsed. It was earned. Leadership, she began softly, isn't about standing in front of people. The room remained perfectly still. It's about the people standing beside you when nobody is watching. Several guests exchanged glances. The sentence carried weight, the kind that came from experience, not theory. For the next 20 minutes, Nia spoke about service, partnership, responsibility, the importance of recognizing those whose contributions often go unseen. No bitterness, no anger, no accusations, just truth. The audience listened carefully. Many found themselves unexpectedly emotional, because they sensed she wasn't speaking only about business. She was speaking about life. Then came the moment nobody expected. A moderator joined her on stage for a short interview. The conversation flowed naturally. Questions about her nonprofit. Questions about leadership. Questions about her future plans. Then the moderator smiled. There is one thing people remain curious about. A ripple moved through the ballroom. Nia remained calm. What role did your experience at Whitmore Capital play in shaping the leader you've become today? The room instantly changed. Every executive understood the significance of the question. Every journalist leaned forward. Across the ballroom, Ethan froze. For the first time all evening, genuine nervousness appeared in his eyes. The moderator continued. Many former employees have described you as one of the company's most influential strategic voices. Silence. Complete silence. Nia smiled gently, not because she enjoyed the attention, because she had already made peace with the past. I learned many lessons there. The answer was diplomatic, respectful, but the moderator wasn't finished. Some people claim your influence was significantly larger than publicly recognized. The tension became visible. Even the cameras seemed closer. Nia paused. For a moment, she looked across the ballroom. Her gaze landed briefly on Ethan, then moved away. When she finally spoke, her voice remained soft. Recognition was never important to me. The audience listened carefully. I believed that if the work helped people, that was enough. Several heads nodded. Then she added something unexpected. But eventually, I learned that allowing others to erase your contributions isn't. Humility. The sentence struck the room like lightning. It becomes permission. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The truth settled heavily over the audience. Years of hidden effort suddenly felt visible. Years of silence suddenly made sense. The moderator looked stunned. So what changed? Nia smiled. The same smile Ethan remembered from the gala. The same smile she wore when she handed him the envelope. The smile of someone who no longer needed approval. I stopped asking people to see my value. A pause. And started seeing it myself. The ballroom erupted into applause. Not polite applause. Not professional applause. A standing ovation. Immediate. Powerful. Authentic. People rose from their seats. One row after another. Executives. Politicians. Investors. Journalists. The entire room stood. Everyone except Ethan. He remained frozen in place. Because at that moment, he finally understood something devastating. The world wasn't celebrating Nia because she had overcome him. The world was celebrating her because she had finally stepped out from behind him. The distinction shattered him. As applause continued, the chairman of one of the nation's largest foundations approached the stage. The audience slowly settled. The chairman smiled warmly. There is something our organization would like to share. A large screen illuminated behind Nia. Images appeared. Photographs. Documents. Partnership records. Historical timelines. The audience watched curiously. Then recognition spread. Several images featured Whitmore Capital. Others showed investor retreats, charity initiatives, corporate partnerships, projects dating back nearly a decade. The chairman continued. Our research team spent months documenting the hidden architects behind major philanthropic and business collaborations across the country. Another image appeared. Nia. Another. Nia meeting community leaders. Another. Nia negotiating partnerships. Another. Nia leading strategy sessions. The audience gasped. The evidence was overwhelming. For years, she had been quietly shaping initiatives that generated billions in economic impact. For years, her fingerprints had been everywhere. For years, her name had been nowhere. The chairman's final words echoed throughout the ballroom. Many people build successful organizations. He looked toward Nia. Very few build successful people. The room rose to its feet again. This time the applause felt even louder, even longer, even more emotional. Across the ballroom, board members from Whitmore Capital stared at the screen in disbelief. Some looked shocked. Others looked embarrassed. A few slowly turned toward Ethan. Because for the first time, they were seeing proof. Not rumors. Not speculation. Proof. And every person in that room was beginning to understand the same thing. Whitmore Capital had not been built by one visionary. It had been built by two. Only one of them had never demanded credit. And in the silence beneath the chandeliers, Ethan realized that the final consequence of his choices was about to arrive.